I was at an EMS weekend recently, and someone pulled me aside and had a conversation with me, and they just said, you're 14 some odd, 15 years down the road. I mean, do you really believe what you say? I mean, what is it like now? Like, do you really hold true to these beliefs? Like, how do you measure your life now? Because you went through this enormous crisis, you're helping all of us, but how do you determine your effectiveness now? And what's kind of your reason for doing all of this, if you will? It was a great question, and I shared some things with that person that were about some health issues that Samantha and I have had to wrestle with over the last few months, and some things intensified recently that I'll share more about in maybe a different blog or what have you. I'm not going to go into it now, but I had this good heartfelt moment with them where I was able to say, the markers that I use to measure my life's effectiveness are radically different than they were in my 20s, my 30s, or even my early 40s. I think we all go through a metamorphosis of how do we measure the effectiveness or the impact of our life. And I think in our 40s and 50s, we have this kind of awakening where what used to be a yardstick is no longer a yardstick. I don't know if that's true for you, but I can tell you that infidelity changes the yardsticks by which you measure your life and the meaning of your life. And today I want to share with you 5 markers that I have found to be probably some of the most effective markers or yardsticks that I measure my life by. I think all 5 are radically true for those that have come through the crisis of infidelity. I think they are absolutely something that you can anchor your life around because they encapsulate a life that has gone through incredible crisis and tragedy, both unfaithful and betrayed, and said, hey, how do I live now? Like, what am I looking for in life now? Because a life that I thought I had is now shattered. What am I going to do now? How am I going to measure my life, especially if you are an unfaithful or even a betrayed, and maybe your job has had to have changed or your career has had to have changed because of the infidelity. And you can begin to really struggle for yardsticks that are meaningful. Because if you were living for money and you've just lost your job or your career, it can be really saddening and depressing to try and use the yardstick of finances or assets or climbing the corporate ladder to measure your life's meaning. Number 1 is, how well are we living? For me, I had to go through a pretty significant adjustment because several years ago I found myself on autopilot again. And for Samantha and I, autopilot is dangerous because I'm just working, just going through the motions, just doing my thing. And people become speed bumps and deadlines become irritants and people seem to be getting in my way, and I'm not really embracing a sense of purpose and value and meaning. I've had to really, over the last few years, significantly kind of go through this point of, look, my life is about living. I'm going to pursue the dreams that are in my heart. I'm going to use a yardstick of, am I truly living or am I on autopilot? Are Samantha and I just going through the motions trying to raise good, strong, healthy kids who are independent, or are we connecting? And am I really living in such a way that I don't hate my life or hate my job or hate the responsibilities of my job? Am I living in such a way where I feel like I have purpose and value and fulfillment? Because I promise you, it's easy to get sucked into just an autopilot. Here, I just do this and that's it. And that's incredibly dangerous for the person who has experienced crisis and trauma and never wants to go back to the person that you were. And so, how well are you living? Number 2 is, how well are you loving? You see, a good definition is, love is the benefit of others at the expense of self. Lust is the benefit of self at the expense of others. And sure, if you come from faith, you can use a biblical definition of love and find that very easily. If you don't come from faith, there's millions of definitions or examples of what love can be and should be. And I'll tell you, I have had to ask myself over several years of my life, how well am I loving Samantha? How well am I loving my kids? When we went through a season as a family where my young kids, all they did was fight, there came a point where I was like, is that loving? Do you think that's loving? I mean, we had to really help our kids not fight constantly because they were so close together in ages. But a crisis will reacquaint you to what you love and what you don't love. Tragedy has a way of helping you see how you want to be loved and what love should look like and what love should not look like. And a marker that I continue to try and remind myself of is how well am I loving the people that are in my circle? How well am I loving my own immediate family? Or what's the most loving way that I can be with Samantha or my kids right now? And it's tough because this world does not cater, in my opinion, to being a loving person. There's deadlines, responsibilities, and if you're going through healing from infidelity, it can be agonizing, and sometimes the last thing that you want to do is be loving to anybody, including your spouse or partner, whether they're unfaithful or betrayed. But if you're going to live a life that really carries with it fulfillment, you have to ask yourself, how loving am I being in life? The third yardstick, and this is a tough one, so just kind of buckle yourself in. This is for unfaithful and betrayed. How well are you forgiving? Please do not hear that as a manipulative statement to you, the betrayed, of how well are you forgiving? Because your life's not going to have any meaning if you can't forgive. Well, listen, forgiveness is a process and it takes time. You've heard that from me 1,000 times. But a benchmark in my life, and I hope it's a benchmark in you, is how well are you forgiving? Let me kind of throw a little curveball at you and tell you that as an unfaithful spouse, you're going to have to get really good at forgiving. How well are you going to be able to forgive the people that just annihilated your character because of your infidelity? How well are you handling the people that are angry and resentful at you for your affairs? How good are you at forgiving your kids? How well are you doing at forgiving the people that are caught in the crosshairs of your situation and don't have a clue on how to handle it? How good are you, or how well are you at forgiving your wounded spouse for maybe their actions in light of your infidelity? If you're a betrayed spouse, learning how to forgive is going to be an essential part of your life, even if you don't save your relationship. But you're going to have to probably be a very good, skilled forgiver, if you will. Certainly if you want to restore your relationship, but if you just want to move on. Forgiveness is going to have to be something that you get really good at, because if you don't, you're going to remain chained in pain and hurt and sorrow. Forgiveness does not mean that what's happened to you was okay. It just means that you're not going to remain a victim for the rest of your life. You may find it odd that the unfaithful would have any problem forgiving, right? I mean, there's a point where you say, look, I've been forgiven for so much, how could I not forgive? But it's really not easy for us. We feel a sense of wounding and we become kind of blind to the fact that we've made some horrible choices, and we become fixated, not all of us, but some of us get fixated on how we've been treated because we feel like we should have some compassion or mercy for being an idiot, right? It's this weird, I was so stupid and I was so not me and caught up, and so it was horrible what I did, but you should forgive me and you should be compassionate and you should love me and care for me. And then people don't, and then we get angry at them. When in reality, we're kind of blind to how we have hurt so many people, or how deeply we've hurt a few people. We have to learn to be able to forgive, because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves chained by anger and resentment and this kind of feeling like a victim, even though that we have our own victims of our choices. I just assure you, if you can't forgive, you're going to find yourself really unhappy, really frustrated, and you'll probably even feel like your repair work or your own healing is stunted. The fourth benchmark, and this one, if you haven't been offended yet, this one will especially give you an opportunity to be offended, but you have to be willing to make amends. And you can go on Google and Google what does it mean to make amends all day long. You can find some wonderful definitions, but a quick summary is, man, being able to own what you've done and compassionate for what your choices have done to other people, and extending permission for them to take all the time that they need to heal. And that sometimes you can't make amends because it's not safe, because it just isn't safe for maybe yourself, or it isn't safe for your spouse or partner. Maybe you can't make amends in some situations, but in some other situations you certainly can. To me, making amends means trying to make it right when it is safe for, first, your spouse or partner, number two, you, as it relates to infidelity, because it's not going to be safe for you to go and try and make amends with the affair partner for how you feel like you abandoned them or terrorized their life or left them high and dry or wounded their spouse and all that stuff. That's usually not a good decision, because that doesn't make your spouse feel safe. It actually makes them feel more unsafe. And the whole focus of your repair work should be about, one, you and your own healing to get healthy, and two, not necessarily in this order, your spouse or partner, and helping them feel safe, like you're willing to do whatever it takes to save the relationship. To me, I've had to learn how to apologize, but then be patient with the time it has taken for others to maybe even be open to the restoration of the relationship. Several years ago, I went on this journey. It wasn't my idea. It was one of my best friends who said, look, there's a lot of people that are still angry and hurt, and some of them are still caught in their own pain and hurt in their own jail cell because of how you wounded them. Would you be willing to meet with some of them and try and apologize and make amends? And at first I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that. And then I thought about it, prayed about it, and I decided, you know what? I think I need to do it. I had to take several trips, and I had a guy who actually paid for all these trips, and I tried to meet with people that were really hurt by my moral public failure. And I'll tell you, some of them went really, really well. We cried, I apologized, we tried to just kind of sift through what did happen, what didn't happen. There was some hugs and some real good sense of, man, I'm going to work on forgiving you, or I do forgive you, and we were able to move on. There were some relationships that they said, there's no way I'm going to meet with Samuel. No way. I don't even want to talk to him. Don't try and set up a meeting. And then there were some that met with me and yelled and screamed and called me lots of names. There was just some that sat with me and said, I don't know that I'll ever be able to forgive you. To some, the meeting was kind of like, hey, I'm glad that you're here. Some were like, I don't care that you're here. You're just doing this for yourself. But I really tried to make amends. And I'm not holding myself up as an example. I'm just telling you that for me, I felt like I needed to do that. And you may feel like you need to do that. But I only did that with people that Samantha felt safe that I was doing it with. The fifth and final benchmark is, how well are you handling adversity? And if you've been an unfaithful spouse, you've created a monstrous amount of adversity. If you're a betrayed spouse, a huge ship of adversity has crashed into your life. And eventually there's a point where you say, look, this is absolutely adversity, and how I handle this is kind of going to set the tone of my life for quite some time. And for those of you that are older than probably, the 20s, you understand that adversity is unfortunately a part of life. Now, infidelity on either side is an amount of adversity that no one should ever have to deal with, but we either brought it upon ourselves or it happened to us. And the fact is, how well we learn to be resilient and develop a sense of grit and toughness is going to determine how we handle recovery and how we move out of this crisis into a new season of life that is meaningful and fulfilling and, believe it or not, one day joyful. The fact is, if you're dealing with infidelity, you're dealing with one of the worst crises a person could go through in life. If you're not a resilient person, this is going to help you become resilient if you allow it to. If you are a resilient person, I would just caution you that maybe what worked for financial crisis or other things like that may not work for this level of crises. So don't think that you know it all, but do understand you're going to have to be resilient. You're going to have thick skin. Your heart is going to have to be resilient if you're going to come out of this alive. And I just want to beg you, if you don't feel safe, if you are struggling with suicide, and I would tell you that suicide comes our way at least once a week to our offices. People struggle with it. People deal with it. Call the suicide hotline. Call them immediately. At least talk to someone. Get help. Don't sit in your own cave and consider throwing it all away because the moment is so dark. I hope that these 5 benchmarks, these 5 yardsticks can help you. I hope that they will become a part of your life for decades to come.